If he gets a suspended sentence while we're sending people to jail for 2-3 years for tweets and for posts on Facebook, if he gets a suspended sentence, there's a very good chance it's going to kick off. We've turned those two, Mohammed 1 and Mohammed 2. We made them do that by our oppressive police force.
The mainstream, I haven't thought about it this way, but the mainstream media were all over this last year. Oh, are Manchester police racist? Was this an unprovoked racist attack? Oh, should these police be struck off? Should there be prosecutions of the police? Well, joining me now is somebody who's been quite outspoken, perhaps not that outspoken at all, essentially. Been on the money. It's Nick Buckley, MBE. Nick, good to see you. That's my short summary. Why don't you say in your words, and obviously you're up in Manchester and you've had an intimate understanding of the situation. Indeed, and I noticed that you've been on X talking about this. Why don't you tell us what you thought this time last year when the mainstream media, wall to wall, every 15 minutes, was implying that Manchester police had been racist by stamping on someone's head?
So initially, that's all we saw. We saw a 2.5-second clip of a armed police officer stamping and kicking the head of a man lying on the floor, an Asian man lying on the floor, and the officer was white. 2.5-second clip, and the country and all the mainstream media went, here we go again. Another racist attack from the racist police. This poor man is lying on the floor. We don't know why, but it doesn't matter why. He kicked him in the head. And straight away, like all these videos, I say, I want to see a couple of minutes before that incident to see what was going on. And then someone at the Manchester Airport CCTV control copied the CCTV and leaked it online. And the police launched an investigation to find the person who leaked the footage of the 3-4 minutes. And what the 3-4 minutes showed us was an assault. 3 police officers, 2 female, well, we can talk about female police officers later, but 2 female police officers and a male officer, I believe all armed, there were armed police at the airport, approached 2 Asian men for an assault that allegedly they'd carried out in a Costa Coffee at the airport. And 2 female police officers grabbed one of the guys, arm either side, and the male officer dealt with the other one. And then it all kicked off. Well, let's call him Mohammed 1 because he's called Mohammed. Both of them are called Mohammed. So Mohammed 1 pushes both female police officers off him and punches both of them to the ground as easy as pie. And the other officer then is trying to deal with the other man who seems to be fighting back. One of the female officers gets up and manages to taser the man who punched her. He goes down. And then the male officer sees the guy on the floor and he's probably thinking to himself, if he gets up and I've got to deal with him and his brother, I'm in deep trouble because I've got a firearm strapped to my waist. And if he gets up, I might have to pull this out. And if I pull this out, I might have to use it. And I don't want to be shooting brown people because that's the end of my job in Greater Manchester Police. So rather than doing that, he kicks him in the head, which police are allowed to use reasonable force. So kicking the guy in the head isn't an issue. The issue is, was it reasonable to kick him in the head? So that's the video we saw. And then we've had to wait a year for it to get to court. It's been in court for the last 3 weeks. And yesterday we got part of the verdicts and part of the result of the court case.
So that's a pretty graphic description. Let's actually have a look at the video if we can get it of the assault. If we can actually find it. Okay, we've got a slight technical issue with that, but let's see if we can get it. Yep. This is the man. I think this is the man who's been found, ostensibly found guilty. I think it's the one on the left there.
Yeah, the younger one.
Yeah, the one on the left. Yeah, I think he's the guy. And this is I think a video. I think we've got a picture of the assault. That's it there. Yeah, quite violent, really. I mean, that's a still, but it's still pretty violent looking stuff. What's he actually doing? Is he actually just kicking the guy?
So the guy in the blue is Mohammed 1, and it looks like he's kicking the police officer who's trying to arrest his brother.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. I wouldn't want to meet him. I don't have any truck with people and that kind of behaviour.
Yeah.
It it does seem to be very difficult to understand that these people, the police, that is, it seems difficult to understand why the police would be to blame whenever this person's pretty guilty by the looks of things. Here we are. There, we got the video now, I think. Let's have a look at this.
Assaulted his mother. He headbutts him and follows up with punches. This set the scene for what came next. Police officers were called, and at a car park pay station they moved in to arrest Amaz on suspicion of assault. His brother, Mohammed Ahmad, was with him. In a flurry of punches, Amaz strikes PC Lydia Ward in the face, breaking her nose. PC Ellie Cook is also struck. CCTV pictures didn't record the sound of what was going on, but the officers' body-worn cameras did. PC Ward's screams can be heard. As other officers arrive, the extent of her injuries can be seen. Amaz was found guilty of causing PC Ward actual bodily harm, of the assault of PC Cook, and the earlier airport assault. He's been remanded in custody. But after 10 hours of deliberating, the jury here at Liverpool Crown Court were unable to come to a decision on the charge that related to both brothers, that of causing actual bodily harm to the male officer involved in this case, PC Zachary Marsden. In response to today's verdicts, the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester Police said, whilst assaults on police officers are sadly not uncommon, 44 of my officers are assaulted every week across Greater Manchester. Such attacks can never be justified. Our officers are decent people who routinely place themselves in harm's way to protect the public. They deserve our respect and support.
Now, that's how it's been reported now. But it was completely different this time last year, wasn't it, Nick? When the police were roundly accused, de facto accused by the mainstream media of a racist assault. And they kept saying how appalling it was, how it looked really terrible and so on. And also, I've noticed that the level of coverage that it's getting now is orders of magnitude less than the coverage it had last year, when the grasping, judgmental mainstream media just assumed the police were guilty, Nick.
They did. So we know the mainstream media is a corrupt organisation. We know they are. So a year ago, it was beneficial for them to be anti-racist, to be on the side of the criminals, to be on the side of Mohammed I and Mohammed II. It was beneficial for them. A year later, it's not beneficial anymore now, because they're on the side of the white population in the UK, of the law-abiding people in the UK, which includes black and brown people as well. Most of them are law-abiding. There's no virtue signalling for them now. Plus, they're also worried about, and we're all worried about, violence from this court case, spread across the country. If this guy who's now been found guilty, if he gets a suspended sentence, while we're sending people to jail for 2-3 years for tweets and for posts on Facebook, if he gets a suspended sentence, there's a very good chance it's going to kick off. So the press are very wary about getting involved in this in case they get blamed for something. But their job isn't to make those decisions. Their job is to report the facts and report the stories, which they're terrible at. I mean, this whole incident will be studied for decades to come, because it's complicated on so many levels. So many levels you can look at this incident and go at different tangents about why it happened, why we have these problems, why the police were assaulted, why the mass media dealt with it the way they did. We could discuss this for weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah, and actually, there's an interesting point you've made there. The mainstream, I hadn't thought about it this way, but the mainstream media were all over this last year. Oh, are Manchester police racist? Was this an unprovoked racist attack? Oh, should these police be struck off? Should there be prosecutions of the police? Almost no suggestion whatever that they were dealing with just violent scum, basically. Somebody who in that video, which interestingly enough, you said had only been released because essentially a whistleblower in Manchester Airport released a CCTV. At that point, nobody in the mainstream media was suggesting anything other than the fact that the police were guilty. I remember actually, to his credit for once, Andy Burnham, he didn't go as far as saying that the reporting was wrong. He said, I've seen everything. We need to look at the full facts. I know you stood against him for mayor, but he was more cautious. And I could tell that he did not agree that this is a racist attack, even though he didn't say it. He didn't have the courage to say that the mainstream media was wrong. But there's this herd mentality, Nick, in the mainstream media. And you're saying that the mindset of this country has changed so much that the mainstream media, instead of reporting the news, are just following the mood.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's have a look at some of the issues in this case, this particular case. So the first thing we need to ask is, why do we have female police officers on the front line? Because that Mohammed one brushed both those two female officers off him as if they were 10-year-old girls. If there had been 3 male police officers attending that incident, this would not have escalated. They would have dealt with those 2 men straight away, and it wouldn't have got to the stage it got to. That's the first point. The second point is we've imported people into this country with a clan mentality. That's where this violence comes from. Those people belong to a Pakistani clan, and the clan is against the world. It's the clan comes first. Not Pakistan, not the religion. Their clan comes first. And if he was watching his brother being arrested, his clan ethics and code and honor and morality says he has to stick up for his brother. That's where this came from. The next point we need to look at is, and the chief constable talks about it, about why aren't the police respected anymore? I'll tell you why they're not respected anymore, because they don't deserve respect anymore. That's why the police are not respected. That's why 44 officers a week, a month in Greater Manchester are being assaulted, because no one respects them. And you're probably thinking, why aren't they respected, Nick? Well, let's talk about 100,000 young, poor white girls being gang raped over 40 years. There's just one incident the police did nothing about. But the police are also arresting us for tweets and, policing different communities in different ways. We call it two-tier policing. This is why the police are not respected anymore. And then we've got problems with the mainstream media. And then we've got problems with the growing sense of violence in the country, that urban violence, civil war is going to break out at any time. And then we've also got uncontrolled migration, open borders, millions of people coming in a year, some of them killing us, raping us, assaulting us. And the average person in the country now feels we're losing the country and it's falling apart at the seams. None of our public services work. And the mainstream media, the elite, the politicians are trying to hold it together with sticky tape because they know it's falling apart. And the mainstream media can only go on about anti-racism, can only go, it's white people, it's the white police, it's this, it's that. And they never address the real issues about why we're failing as a nation. Like I said, we could discuss this particular case for months.
Why are we failing as a nation?
Oh, it's been happening slowly for 100 years. It's down to lots of things. So I've sort of pinpointed some of it down to the beginning of feminism. We over-feminized men. We told men that masculinity was toxic, and this has been going on for 100 years. So men started rejecting their roles of being protector and provider. We then built up the welfare state, and we said to people, you can be a beggar, just be a beggar off other people, and that's fine. And we'll even raise your children for you. We'll make sure they're fed at school. We'll take away all your parental responsibility. Marxism, this dream of a socialist utopia never seems to go away. And I've got theories why that will never die. I understand why that will never die. Then you're looking at mass immigration from the 50s onwards, never wanted. From Windrush up to today, the British people have never wanted mass migration, and we've been ignored. Mass migration brought more crime, it brought more problems, it started fragmenting society that was already fragmented because of feminism, Marxism, the welfare state, and its accumulation of incompetence and self-inflicted damage for at least 150 years. And we get to where we are now, where we're inviting rapists into the country to rape our women and children. And when they do, and we've paid them to do it, basically. And when they do, we can't even kick them out of the country. And we think our country is a normal, decent country. Still, we're a basket case.
You paint a pretty grim picture, to be honest with you. One which I generally agree with, I'm sorry to say. Let's get back to the Manchester airport assault. And I was saying that the mainstream media are on trial as well. Jeremy Kyle, who has quite a reputation for being outspoken, did an interview at the time. I want to show it to you because it completely underlines the extent to which the mainstream media, and talk is no better than anybody else, mainstream media simply followed this assumption, and it's so heavily loaded with inference, what Jeremy Kyle says and his guest, that the police are guilty. If we can play the clip from Jeremy Kyle, please.
Talk to you about, but I want to start with some distressing footage. Now, I'm going to warn people who can see this. It is incredibly depressing and quite worrying. It's footage circulating on social media from Manchester Airport, showing a suspect, we're watching it right now, being tasered by police before, with the greatest of respect, having his head kicked in and being stamped upon. Now, you can also see, if I can explain it to you, it's awful. The second man on the bench can also be seen being shouted at by the officer to get on the floor before being kicked and strongly mishandled as well. It's really, really graphic, Mike. It's pretty it's unedifying in every sense. It's understood now that the officers were responding to an altercation between members of the public at Terminal 2 at Manchester Airport last night, when one of the suspects attacked one of the officers. But if you're watching what I'm watching, with a police officer kicking somebody in their head and stamping on them, you would understand that questions are now being asked about reasonable force and proportionality. Now, the Greater Manchester police officer claim, this is their claim, that officers feared that the alleged attackers could have taken or used their guns. They were armed officers, and their excuse for stamping on a man's head and kicking him repeatedly, I would be utterly shocked if he wasn't severely injured as a result, I could be wrong, was, as I say, as the attending officers were firearm officers, there was a clear risk, say GMP, that this assault, their weapons could have been taken them. 4 men were arrested at the scene for a fray. We acknowledge, though, says GMP, the concerns of the conduct within the video, and our Professional Standards Directorate are assessing it. Mike Neville, we spend a lot of time criticising certain parts of the police. When the public see videos like this, appalling. What's your thoughts?
Yes, at first sight. I mean, we don't know the full context, but Jeremy, this is just, the video looks awful, doesn't it? The way the man's head bounces off the boots. I mean, one of my areas of expertise was CCTV and showing crimes in action. And if you say to somebody got kicked in the head, that's one thing. When you see it just looks appalling. It just looks too much.
He kicked his head, as you said, flies everywhere, and then he stamps on his head twice. Now, listen, we came into the office, Ricky had this, we're all talking about it, and let's be perfectly honest, we're thinking, if that was a terrorist, if you were concerned about a person with a weapon or maybe an explosive, with everything that's gone on, you might go, I get that. As it turns out, these people have been arrested at the scene for a fray. I mean, I have to ask you, police brutality or reasonable force?
Now, that's the problem. Jeremy Kyle has completely disgraced himself by saying mishandled at the beginning. There's no objectivity in this report at all, Nick.
No, absolutely not. I was on Talk TV the day after this incident, being interviewed about this incident, and the presenter said to me, there's absolutely no scenario where kicking him in the head and stamping him on the head is justified. There is no scenario you can paint, Nick, to justify that. So I said to him, right, what happens if the police think he has a suicide vest on and he's got a split second to disable him in case he presses the button and explodes it? And the presenter goes, should shoot him in the head then. So I said, so you don't want him stamped on the head to save his life, but you're quite happy for the officer, his first port of call is to shoot the guy in the head. And he goes, yeah. And I went, this makes no sense. If you're distressed at being kicked in the head, but you're quite happy the first port of call is to shoot him in the head, you guys don't know what you're talking about. And that's what this comes down to. Most presenters have never been assaulted. I worked with the police for 20 years. I've worked on the streets with the police for many years, and I've worked on the streets as a youth worker for many years. I've seen violence. I've stopped violence. I've got 19 stitches in my head where I've got smashed on the head with an iron bar. I've been held up at gunpoint, a gun pointed in my face. I've seen violence. These people haven't. So for them, it's what they see in the movies. He should have done a karate kick and knocked the weapon out of his hand, then done a flying kick, hit him in the chest and knocked him unconscious. And that 4'4" woman should have done the same. She should have done a Marvel superhero flying kung fu karate thing and knocked him over. Doesn't work like that in real life. And these people have got no experience. And don't get me wrong, our police are incompetent. Our police are corrupt. Our police are doing a really poor job everywhere they are. But we need to make sure that we see all the evidence before we make judgments. And the officer who kicked him in the head was referred to a disciplinary panel for it and was found not guilty. So even the police, when they looked at the evidence, went, no, absolutely fine. And I think it was absolutely fine when you see the full video.
Yeah, it's interesting the way you describe it. You've got very low opinion about police, and having seen the police in action in action in London, I would tend to agree with you. And also the other subject, which we'll come back to on a different day, the wholesale raping of children and the police apparently colluding to cover it up. I'm sympathetic with that. But the way that the mainstream media just immediately jumped onto the attack the police situation, and that's Jeremy Kyle, obviously saying pretty much what you just said. Oh, under no circumstances was this acceptable, and him leading his witness there to agree. Somebody who's obviously Mike Neville, who obviously got it wrong as well, totally the wrong call, because as you say, the police were exonerated very quickly. I'm wondering, how is it that we've got to a situation where the mainstream media have got to a situation last year where they were just jumping on anything to defend ethnic minorities in these situations, making the assumption the police were corrupt. And now, a year later, they hardly give it any lip service at all. It's like item number 6 or something instead of item number 1, and it'll be gone by the afternoon in the newsreels, I'd say, Nick.
I'm glad you asked that, because I explain all this in my new book about Islamophobia. Not Islamophobia, Anglophobia. There's a Freudian slip for you.
You're guilty. You're guilty.
It's because in this country, you're allowed to be anti-white. In this country, you're allowed to be anti-British. And not only are you allowed to be that, you're celebrated when you are. So if those two, if Mohammed 1 and Mohammed 2 were actually John Smith 1 and John Smith 2, and the same video appeared with a John Smith head on Mohammed 1, the media hardly would have reported this case. This case became famous because of the racial element to it. And we racialized our society. We've basically balkanized our society now over the last 20, 30 years. That's why the police different areas differently, because the people who live there. The media, the establishment have been pushing this anti-British, anti-white narrative, where a brown person, a black person, someone who's a little bit exotic, someone who's got a different religion, they can never be wrong. They have to have been persecuted. If they're a criminal, a good one is black criminals. Police shoot a black criminal. Well, isn't that a shame? He's a career criminal and we shot him dead. And do you know what? It is a shame for that black criminal, because it can't be his parents' fault for raising a criminal, because they're black and black people can't do anything wrong. So it can't be their fault. It must be our fault as society. We must have turned him into a criminal. Isn't that appalling what we've done? We've turned those two, Mohammed 1 and Mohammed 2. We made them do that by our oppressive police force. They were and that was their defense. We're terrified. The police came to us. We know they're racist. They were going to shoot us. They were armed. We thought they were going to kill us because we were Asian and because we were Muslim. We were so scared. We were fighting for our lives. And that narrative has been pushed on us now for decades and decades. And many people in this country believe it. And many people push this narrative. Well, the truth is, it's a complete opposite. Brown and black and Muslim and Jewish and Hindu, if you're different to what we imagine a white British person to be, you have an easier ride in this country. All the stats show it to be true.
It's interesting what you say there in terms of the statistics. Also interesting in terms of the reportage. You were talking about the fact that the mainstream media tend to take that position. The Guardian at the time was very clear. Guardian, I call it a newspaper, but I don't really feel it is much of a newspaper anymore. It basically covered it in no uncertain terms. It said something like racism played part in police kick incident at Manchester Airport, says former senior officer. Former Met Chief Superintendent Dal Babu says footage of man being kicked in face by officer is totally appalling. So the Guardian was very happy to say that racism played a part in this particular case.
Of course.
I wonder why they don't have to put it right whenever they say these things. I don't know why they're not prevented from saying these kinds of things. So go ahead, Nick.
Because it's perfectly acceptable. Even when you're proven to be wrong, if you're being anti-white and you're being proven to be wrong, that's still acceptable. And that statement there, racism played a part when this was a day or two after the incident and no one knew what was going on. That's perfectly acceptable because this is critical race theory. Critical race theory states that every interaction between a white person and a non-white person involves racism. The reason why you can't see the racism is either because you're not looking close enough or you're actually a racist and don't want to see it. But every interaction is a racist interaction. And that's critical race theory. And most of these people at university have been indoctrinated into this. This is what anti-racism means. It means there's always racism. And if you can't see the racism, you're the racist.
That's a shocking analysis. I'm leaving this on the screen for a minute because we have to just recognize this is what the Guardian, a once pretty good newspaper decades ago, this is what the Guardian said. Racism played part in police kick incident. We now know, I'm pretty sure I can say this, that racism played no part in it at all. The violent thuggery of the guilty man, and they'll be retried for the rest of it, the violent thuggery of the guilty man played a part, but I can't see any reason for thinking this is about racism.
And that's because you're a racist. And there was racism in this incident, but the racism came from Mohammed I and Mohammed II, because those two people were the racists because they want to live in this country under different laws, under different norms than everybody else do. They want to live under the norm of clan-based law, which means we can do whatever we want if we're protecting our clan. And we don't respect the police in this country because, first of all, two of them were women, and women, they're not even full citizens, women, and I had two of them put their hands on me. No wonder I broke their noses, because they put their hands on me, a Pakistani Muslim man. They're lucky I only broke their noses. And the other officer was trying to arrest us. He's just a white police officer. You have no say over me. I'm a Pakistani Muslim. I'm better than you, and I reject your laws in this country. I reject your traditions. I reject how you live in this country, because I live in my own community. I live in Rochdale. I live in my own little Pakistani Rochdale community, and we look after ourselves. And we don't want to interact with the rest of society because we're a little ghetto now. We're a little piece of Pakistan in Rochdale. There was racism in this, but it didn't come from the police.
Well, how do we get out of this situation? How do we actually restore some semblance of objectivity in the media, in the mainstream? I've often said I want Unprecedented not to beat the mainstream, but to be the mainstream. So I'm playing my part. But Is there any hope for the legacy media?
There's hope for a tiny, tiny percentage of it to survive. And we need some of it to survive, because the alternative is, and this is no disrespect to you, but the alternative is we can't have all our media coming from X accounts or Facebook accounts or YouTube accounts, because 20, 30, 40 years ago, our mainstream media was better funded and they would double check facts, and they were still slightly biased. Of course, we're all biased. We're humans. Of course we are. But at least they did some fact checking, where now, we can be told stuff on X and YouTube, and it turns out all to be false, where that wouldn't have happened 30, 40 years ago. But mainstream media is too big. It's dying. And I reckon one or two institutions may survive. But you're right. The new media will be people like you. And if this channel grows and you get more money coming in, you will have the staff then to do the fact checking and to be able to start replicating what the mainstream media used to do. So that is part of the future as well.
Interesting you've put it that way. I was actually on an alternative TV station about half a year ago. No, maybe it was a year ago. And I watched a video of Joe Biden and I thought, that can't be right. It was being presented as news. Of course, it was a fake video, because they hadn't checked it. And that is a danger when smaller organizations get in to a position of influence. But then the mainstream media is terrible. I won't go into it in detail now, but the idea that there's a climate emergency is preposterous. But they all go along with it. And they keep telling everybody there's a climate emergency. It's getting more and more difficult to justify that. But they're terribly guilty of hard thinking as well. If you had one piece of advice about the Manchester, or one lesson from the Manchester airport misreporting, what would that lesson be, Nick? What can we learn from this?
What can we learn about the misreporting of this? I think it's simple. We've just seen it with Tommy Robinson the other day, with being a CCTV clip online showing part of a alleged assault. And I'll say exactly what I said about that. We don't know what went on. Whenever you see a video, a couple of seconds, 3, 4 second, 10 second, 30 second clip, the first thing you should ask yourself is, why isn't this clip longer? What happened before this incident? Another good example would be the Runcorn MP, Mike Ainsbury, who lost his seat because he punched someone in the face drunk on a Friday night. When I first saw that couple of second clip, my initial response was, no, I want to see what went on before that. He was probably being attacked. That's what was going on there. And then we saw more CCTV, and it turns out he wasn't being attacked. The guy was talking to him. We didn't hear what he said. He may have been swearing. He may have been saying things that weren't nice, but he wasn't violent. He wasn't waving his arms around. He had his arms basically in his pockets, and Mike Ainsley punches him for nothing. We always need to see more information. And when people are stopping you seeing more information, it means there's a reason why they don't want you to see it. So we always should demand to see more before we start jumping to conclusions.
Thanks, as always, Nick. Very interesting to hear your view. That's Nick Buckley, MBE, taking a cynical view. No, it's not cynical. That would suggest he's wrong. A very negative view about police, but an even more negative view of the mainstream media. Where do we go? Well, hopefully Unprecedented will grow and will be effective in giving a more objective analysis. Everybody, of course, has a bias. But if you know what the bias is, then you can draw conclusions for yourselves.